Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bourbon Bites Whiskey Reviews with an 80s twist. I'm your host, Clifton, and welcome to another Thursday night live stream. Thank you guys for bearing with me. I was out last week on a bit of a trip to Seattle, but that's very relevant because tonight's stream is a distillery based in Washington State. Seattle specifically. I actually was able to go to their tasting room over the past weekend. Got to try a little preview of some of their products, but today I'm back and doing a review of these, but not alone. I will actually be joined by a very, very special guest. I'll go ahead and bring him on now since I messed up and you guys saw the background really quickly before I was supposed to show it. So let's go ahead and bring on Jason Parker. Jason, welcome. Jason is the president and co-founder of Copperworks Distilling in Seattle. Jason,
Hi,
welcome.
Clifton. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So I've heard so much about this. You know, I'm always looking up West Coast distilleries now that I live out in Los Angeles. I've heard of Copperworks for the longest time, but I hadn't had a chance to try it. Coincidentally, the trip to Seattle wasn't necessarily planned at the time that I booked you guys on the show. So it was a weird coincidence that I was able to go to the distillery, but I had so much fun tasting through it. I took some notes while I was there. There was an incredible bartender or a person on site to kind of walk me through the tasting. I do want to give him a shout out because I wanted to say how great he was at the tasting. But let me pull it up. Sorry, I meant to have that up. Here we go. Here, Ethan was there serving. Yes,
Wonderful.
He was great.
Wonderful.
Yeah, he was great.
Ethan's one of our newest employees, and he is just loving the work, and so we're so happy to have him there.
Yeah, he's so passionate about whiskey, and he's so great at telling your story. And I'm sure that you're going to be able to tell us all here tonight. But I learned so much that day. So
good.
Well, first of all, I guess maybe do an introduction to Copperworks, and then we'll start asking a little bit about yourself and your background. So what is Copperworks Distilling?
So Copperworks Distilling is a American single malt whiskey producer primarily. We also make vodka and gin, which is, gin is basically a flavored vodka. We make all of them from 100% malted barley. So we basically make a beer with no hops and then distill the alcohol out of it. I hope we get a chance to really get into some of that process because I want to talk a lot about the difference between the starting product that we make and the starting product that more traditional distilleries make.
Oh, we will. This crowd is very nerdy, so we can talk all nerdy all night. Awesome. Well, cool. So I believe you come from a brewing background before Copperworks. Is that true?
That's right. Yep. I was the first brewer at a place called Pike Place Brewery here in Seattle. We opened up Pike Place Brewery in 1989. Really decided that brewing was what I wanted to make my career in. So I went back to school to do chemistry and microbiology. And while I was in school, got to consult with a little brewery, help them get started. They're called Fishtail Ales, and then graduated and moved back up to Seattle where you were visiting. There was a company at the time that was really exciting. It was called Red Hook Brewing, and so I got to brew at Red Hook. And then after about a year and a quarter of being at Red Hook, I had the opportunity to become one of the founding brewers of Pyramid Breweries and help build the Pyramid Brewery factory in downtown Seattle, and became brewmaster eventually after about 7 years of being there. Just loved brewing. There's I feel like, but we'll pick it up.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, I think craft beer. I mean, I always think of like Seattle as kind of being like a craft beer capital of, at least on the West Coast. I just hear of so many breweries popping up out of there. Do you feel like craft whiskey is kind of like the next thing up in that area that you guys are kind of pioneering in?
Well, I think that was absolutely true in the beginning. There was a time when Washington had more craft distilleries than any other state in America. And that time was only, honestly, 8 years ago. But a lot of laws have changed in bigger communities like California, communities like New York, where there are now so many more distilleries because there's so many more people. But I do feel like we established a couple of things right off the bat. We required that everybody used local ingredients as at least 50% of the starting material. And that led to a lot of craft instead of buying grain neutral spirits and flavoring it or rebottling it and just proofing it. So we have a lot less MPG product in Washington distillery products. You'll find in other states almost all of their craft product, not almost all, but a lot of their
A
craft
lot of
product
it.
is actually made at other distilleries and then repackaged, maybe after proofing, maybe after barreling, maybe after finishing, but nonetheless, not really distilled on site. So that was the neat thing about Washington, and I feel like we did a good job of that. We started that in 2008, June. It became legal in Washington to do craft spirits.
Wow. Okay, that recently, June of 2008.
That's right.
Wow.
Dry Fly was the distillery in Spokane, Washington. They got the bill passed. And what that bill basically said is that if you use, the most important thing is it started with the sentence, distilling is an agricultural process, right? And then below that, it gave privileges to those who opened up craft distilleries and used Washington agriculture as a base. If
Oh,
you
I
used
see.
50% or more, then you could have a tasting room. You could self-distribute. You paid less taxes. You had a lower fee for the permit. And so all of these values were given to people who were using Washington produce or grain as a starting point. That lasted for a while, but honestly, it became a problem because we had some really great distilleries making amazing gins, amazing absinthe, and things that they really couldn't make or didn't need to make using Washington ingredients, but they were still crafty. They were still adding a lot of flavor and a lot of value, and they're small businesses. So we unraveled that piece by piece. We unraveled that bill, or I should say, those rules to allow non-craft to become part of the distilling environment in Washington and still get the same privileges. So now, when you make the decision to use Washington ingredients, it's not a mandate. It's a personal decision if that's what you want to do. You want to do that because of your values, because of your flavor differentiation, but you don't have to do it in order to get all of the privileges. So we kind of got the best start, and then we removed that incentive to allow more flexibility in distilling in Washington. And I think we did a lot of those things right.
Yeah, I would have never realized that was a thing. I guess just not living in Washington, I wasn't aware of that. What was the decision to go from? I mean, obviously using the Washington grown grains. What was the decision to make it like a beer mash? Like, was that just because of your history and your background, or was it just kind of like not really been done that often? I'm just curious what went into that decision.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and thank you for bringing it up. So let me just mention, by the way, to put a fine point on it to that last point, we are 100% Washington grown ingredients. We have been for almost 10 years, and we're now 50% salmon safe, which is the certification we can talk about later.
Sure.
Ingredients for the barley. So back to your question, why beer mash instead of a traditional mash? So I grew up in Kentucky. I drank a lot of bourbon. I have maybe 600 or 800 bottles of bourbon open.
Oh wow! I thought I had a lot at like 300. So okay, wow.
Well, honestly, bourbon is done. I mean, bourbon has been made so well for so many years in such volumes that I personally didn't see a market even 13 years ago, 14 years ago when we started the ideation for this company. We didn't believe that bourbon was the right pathway to go down because it was great. And the best reward you would ever get, the best compliment you would get is somebody say, damn, this stuff is almost as good as Kentucky bourbon. And I was like, well,
that's a good fact.
Right?
Yeah.
It's done. It's very tasty and very affordable. Micah Nutt, my business partner, and I were at a tasting that I did a monthly whiskey tasting. And I bought a bottle of Stranahan's Colorado whiskey and I set it on the table. I had never tasted it. It was still closed and sealed. We tasted some scotches. We tasted some bourbons that day. And then we opened up this bottle of whiskey and we tasted it. And we realized it tasted like nothing we had ever tasted before. I was like, why in the world has this whiskey not been in front of me? I have thousands of bottles of whiskey and I've never tasted this before. It turns out that it was, even though there was no such word at the time, an American single malt whiskey made in America, but like a single malt would be made in Scotland, with one really big difference. It started with a beer recipe made by a brewer and fermented like a brewer. And I was like, hey, I'm a brewer. I know how to do this. This is something that I actually have a lot of experience in. So Micah and I started talking and decided, you know what, we're going to open up a distillery based on the concept of making a really high quality beer. Why high quality and not efficient is something I also want to get into with you here. As we talk about how products are made traditionally versus how products are made, say, in a brewery. Breweries, only when they're big, are really focused on efficiency. But when they're small, their target is flavor. Their target isn't how many proof gallons of pure grain alcohol can I get from a ton of barley. Their interest is in flavor, and they steer by flavor. And that's true up until a certain size. But in distilleries have been steering by yield. And that's what causes Scotch distilleries to close and their brand to move to a new, more modern distillery that has higher yields. The gold standard right now is 440 liters of pure alcohol per metric ton of grain. And if you can get close to that, you're going to get the reward of being able to stay open and distill those brands that the old mothballed, soon to be mothballed distillery just can't reach. Well, that's not a flavor decision. That's an economic decision.
Sure.
We can't win on yield. We're too small, and we'll always be chasing our tails. We'll never be able to win on yield. But what we can win on is doing something that the big guys would simply say, there's no money in that. That can't pencil out. That doesn't make sense to do a beer wash when we could get 20% more alcohol per ton of grain and make spirits out of it. Well, that's true, but you can't make the spirits taste the same. They're going to taste like traditional spirits, the way they've always made them. Now, I can go into the history of why farmers started chasing yield when they became distillers, and how those farmer distillers became professional distillers, and how that is now the gold standard of all distilling in America, or in the world for that matter. But honestly, flavor is taking a page out of the book of brewing. Flavor is what craft brewing is all about. And that's what small distilleries have the opportunity to win on, is flavor. Flavors that can't be made from efficient distilling.
That's actually, I've never heard it put that way, but that's actually what I love the most about some of craft distilleries is it tastes like nothing I've had before. Yes, a lot of them do want to try to emulate, like you said, Kentucky bourbon, and like, oh, well, our stuff tastes like bourbon, which is great, but having a unique flavor is something that I think is really special. And that's one thing I noticed when I did visit the distillery. I didn't know what to expect. I had never had it before, but I think what you guys do has a unique flavor, and I'm excited to get into it. So I forgot to ask you before the stream, what order would you like us to do these tastings of these 5 samples that I have?
Yeah, remind me the numbers again. I need to write them down so I remember, or the samples.
Sure. Yes, so I have the Malt Smith, the Farm Smith, and the Peat Smith.
Right.
I also have the Color Cask and the Amaro finished, I believe.
Okay, great. Let's do Malt, Farm, Peat, Amaro, and then Color.
Awesome. Yeah, let's do it. Well, I want to say, while we get at least the first one poured, I do want to say hello to some folks in the chat. I see you guys in the chat. Just apologies for there you go. So we got Aaron here in the chat. What's up, Whiskey Pear? Good to see you. We have Tony in the chat. We have Michael in the chat. Alfonso, Donnie, the Linux Cat's here. Adam Freeze here. Who else is here? I see quite a few names. By the way, these folks are from all over the country. A lot of these folks are in Southern California, but others are out in Tennessee, out in Chicago. Man, where else do we have people from? If you guys, if I don't, oh, Eric Gunderson, I'm not familiar with you, but welcome to the chat. Let us know where you guys are from. I'm curious to hear. I do see some fans of the beer. I see people back when you were mentioning the beers, fans of Red Hook and Pyramid. Tony says, I remember Red Hook in my beer days. So they're very familiar with what you guys are doing. DMC is here. Artfully Bourbon is here as well. Maureen Franchi, hello. Oh man, such a great crowd tonight. If I missed you, feel free to chime in later. We'd love to hear your comments and questions. You guys feel free to ask anything. This is a very open forum for us to ask questions. I have my questions, but if there's any questions you guys want to ask, feel free to let us know. Like I said, we can get nerdy here. It sounds like Jason's open to like talking some specs and stats and things like that. I know you guys love that. So Whiskey Uncensored is here as well. Corn and Whiskey, Fat Corn. Awesome. Great crowd tonight. Good to see you guys. Michigan. Maureen Franchi is in Michigan, Missouri, Tennessee, New York, Iowa. Wow. People from all over. So welcome, folks. Glad to have you here, and I'm glad to share this whiskey with you all. Now, in terms of distribution, where are you guys available to order or buy Copperworks?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. Thank you for hitting that early on. So we only are distributed through 3-tier distribution in Washington State. We ship to 34 other states. So
Gotcha.
The easiest way to buy Copperworks is definitely to go online to copperworksdistilling.com and buy. One of the great things about that is we have the highest spirit tax in America. It's 20.5% per bottle plus $2.83 for a 750 ml bottle. So we end up being about 25%.
I was I can attest as a tourist. The first time I went to Washington, I was awestruck at the liquor store of how expensive liquor is. But I think it's just part of the tax system there. And you guys don't have state income tax, right? Is that correct?
We don't. So yeah. So as a visitor, you're paying taxes on hotels that are kind of outrageous, on taxes and fees like that are outrageous. So thank you very much for coming and keeping our schools running and our roads.
Of course.
Yeah. So the other thing, one of the things we'll be tasting tonight is the Amaro cask, and that is our second release, which comes out tomorrow, in fact.
Oh, wow.
And that is a something we just started this year is our whiskey club. So it's an exclusive just to the whiskey club members. And that's I think we've sold about half of it now.
Wow.
So we'll be selling out that. It'll launch tomorrow, and then we'll see how that goes.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've noticed a lot of like other brands like getting into like the whole whiskey club of it all. But that's an amazing way to, like you said, pre-order. You said half of it's already sold and it's not even out yet. That's so incredible, especially for a small distillery offering something like that. Get locals, get people that are involved. I saw the cards for it when I was at the distillery. I wanted to sign up, but I'm like, no, I'll leave this to other folks that are in the area. But that's so cool. And actually, when I was there, they had a different one of the finishes. I think it was the red wine cask finish one that I tried while I was there as well.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It was very good. So I'm excited to work our way through these and try that one. I did take some notes throughout the tasting while I was there. I think I tried most of these. Of course, Ethan was great. He let me try some other things that have already like sold out. I tried a cask strength version of your peated whiskey, which was incredible. One of my favorite pours of the night.
Very fun.
But let's start with the Maltsmith. Tell us a little bit about this one. I see it's bottled at 100 proof, 50% ABV. What's the story behind this one?
Yeah, so first of all of our regular whiskeys we bottle at 100 proof. We'll talk a little bit about that, but I won't dive into too much detail unless we get questions about it. When you raise the proof, you stand the risk of it giving a burn, but you also get a longer finish. The reason that we can bottle at 100 proof instead of 80, 86, 91, 92 is because we end up with less of a burn. And the reason we end up with less of a burn is because we start with a beer and not all of the sugars fermented into alcohol. Some of the more complex sugars are still left in the palate. And that coats your mouth, lets you have a higher proof, which leads to a longer finish. So we're sort of characterized by two things: a really malty background flavor. Well, I'm going to say three things: a malty background flavor, a low burn, and a long finish. So what is Maltsmith? When I was at Pike Brewing, I made the last year I helped in brewing up there is called the Kilt Lifter. It's a Scotch ale. It's about 9% alcohol. I didn't get to name it. Charles Finkel named it. That's a great name.
That's a fun name. I like it.
But it is a very delicious malt-forward beer. And it just seemed to me that we needed one of our recipes to be very beer-focused. I got some of the inspiration, again, from the Stranahan's Colorado whiskey. But honestly, that was my favorite beer that I had ever made in any of the breweries I worked in. And I wanted to feature something similar to that. I left out the unmalted barley. It had some wheat. I left that out. It had some peated malt. I left that out. But I used the concept of a lot of caramels and crystal malts below a level bond of about 120, meaning that I'm not getting into chocolate malt and black patent malt and dark flavors that, in my mind, are very divisive. People either love it, they think it tastes like a chocolate bar, or they hate it, they think it tastes like burned toast. And so I didn't want to do that in a whiskey. So that's the malt smith. It's 75% pale malt, 10% caramel 30-37, 6% special B, about 125 Levibon, 6% biscuit malt, about 20 Levibon, and 4% melanoid. Melanoid's kind of there for the mouthfeel and the aroma.
Gotcha. I think that's something that I learned just from tasting at the tasting room is like how these specific malts come together. I think that's something we don't really think about, at least in the American whiskey world. You know, we hear malt, malted barley, and we're like, sure, malted barley. We don't think about the specific varietals when it comes to that. And I know in beer, I'm thinking of hops. On the can of beer, it lists all the hops that are involved.
Yeah,
but with whiskey, we don't
New Zealand, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so on whiskey, we don't really think about that. So hearing, even in the tasting room being said, like, oh yeah, this is this malt, this malt, this malt. I'm like, that kind of blew my mind. I had never really considered that being a factor into it. And I will say the nose on this is so unique, unlike any other whiskey in general I think I've had. Yeah.
Well, so we're going to get more into the conversation about special varieties of barley in the next one, the farm smith. But in this one, the malt smith, the reason it's named malt smith is because we're exploring what happens when you take different kiln heat treatments of that malt and express them into a whiskey. So you remember early in this podcast, I mentioned the fact that we're not chasing yield. So one of the things that leads to higher yield is using pale malt and malt that is very specifically going to ferment out to alcohol, not leave residual flavors by. But as you kiln that malt to make different colors of beers, different flavors of beer, you lose some of the alcohol potential because you now have caramelized sugars that will not ferment. But you end up with flavors, you end up with aromas, and you end up with texture. And those things are what make a beer. Well, turns out that when you distill those things, you don't just get the alcohol. I thought all you got when you distilled was alcohol, but you actually get some of those residual sugars, some of those oils, and some of the things that are not just the conjugators that are the flavor components, esters and aldehydes, but you get other factors that come in, and especially some of those long chain sugars. So that's what you're smelling and what you're tasting is literally the malt. So we call it malt smith.
Makes total sense. Well, awesome. I'm excited to give this a taste. Cheers to you. Thank you so much for sharing this with me. I'm excited to give it a try.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah. It brings me right back to the tasting room. It's like so different. It's hard to describe because it's like, it has like a sweet caramel quality to it that I think is familiar as like a bourbon drinker, but the way it expresses itself is a little bit richer, a little bit more full bodied. I've had other American single malts, and I think this kind of leans into, getting a little bit of feedback. I think, are you still there? I may have lost.
I'm not sure if that's me or you, so I'm trying to
okay.
See how it go away.
Interesting. Okay. I have headphones switched. Hopefully it shouldn't be me, because I hear myself echoing. I think it might be on your end.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to I'm going to quit touching things and see if that helps. Seems like it might have been better. Or is it still coming?
It sounds a little bit like robotic. I think it's like maybe a signal thing. Like maybe are you on Wi-Fi or?
Yeah, let me unplug here and see if that helps a little bit.
Sure.
That help?
No worries.
Okay. Yeah, still hear it. That's interesting. I am going to go back. Well, keep talking. I can hear you, but I am going to mess around here and see if I can't improve this sound a little bit. Is that any better?
Okay, I'm gonna put you on mute so it doesn't be too loud. But give me a thumbs up when you're ready to test it. How about that?
Okay, great.
Cool. Yeah, we had some technical issues earlier on my end, so it's only fair that he has some technical issues on his end. But yeah, so like I said, I tried this at the distillery. Was a lot of fun. I took some notes when I did it. I said that this one was the most bourbon-like, I think, of all of their lineup. To me, it's very flavor forward. You know, it's 100 proof, so of course it's going to carry with it some good flavor, but it has a sweetness and a bit of a. It kind of, as someone coming from the world of bourbon, to me, it's almost like I would interpret it as a rye, but it's not a rye, like a rye grain. There's a bit of that grain character there that kind of complements the sweetness of the caramel. So to me, it feels like a good entry into the brand, but some of the other stuff I think is even more exciting for fans of whiskey and fans of bourbon. So I'm excited to see what as we go through these.
Sounds like we might be back.
Oop, it still sounds a bit off. What was your method that we were playing with earlier of using the other device to do the audio? Should we maybe try that?
Interesting. Yeah, you were gone for a little bit, but now you're back. How's the sound?
Oh, it's still not great on my end for you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. It was something perfect. Everything was perfect. Something happened.
I know my phone is charging because I'm getting down in juice, so I'm wondering if that's what's happening.
Oh, potentially, maybe. Yeah, I'm asking the chat. The chat says I hear it on your end as well, unfortunately. Let's see. Let's just trying to think how best to. It's funny because I hear myself coming back through your speakers, and it's like I sound robotic, so it's crazy. It's like,
yeah, I hear you coming through that way too.
Oh, you do? Interesting. Okay. Do you guys in the chat hear me that way, or do you just hear it on his end? Let me know, because if it's a me problem, it could be me. Oh, someone said if the phone's plugged in, that can cause it. I don't know how or why.
Well, I did unplug the phone for a while, but that didn't seem to make it better.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about this.
No, it's okay. It's all good. Listen, it happens. It's not our fault. I always blame technology.
I'm going to see if I can come up with another solution here.
I know you said the camera on your computer wasn't working, but if you wanted to be camera off, if your microphone's still working, we could always do that as well.
Yep, I'm going to do that. I'm going to log in there. Entering the studio now.
Someone said they blame the Canadians. Yes, it's definitely the Canadians. All right, let me try Actually, can you try saying... Oh, wait, you're muted right now. Can we try it one time before we do that? Okay, hold on. Let me try this.
Okay.
Test. 1 2 1 2.
That sounds better.
It sounds better to me too.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have the computer as a backup. Let's try this, and then if it starts acting weird again, let's switch to the computer. How about that?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Cool. Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. So I was just saying that the Maltsmiths, to me, it feels like a good entry into the brand. I feel like we get a little bit of the character from just the malt itself. I know for me personally, I think some of these are a little more exciting for me, but I think this one is kind of meant as a crowd pleaser. It is my understanding. It kind of feels like it's very, everyone can get into this, even if, no matter if you're a bourbon fan, Scotch fan, Irish whiskey fan, it's just a really approachable, easygoing whiskey. So that was my thoughts. What do you get out of Maltsmith? Like, what's your favorite part of it?
Well, a couple of things. One, remember that I'm a brewer, and so when I taste that, I taste a variety of malt flavors in
Mm.
there that I don't normally get out of a Scotch. I don't normally get out of an Irish. I certainly don't get out of a corn or rye-based whiskey. And so I get flavors that include finishes like mango or peach or stone fruit, and I get a sort of tobacco or kind of dark leather out of it. So that's certainly coming from the new oak, but also from the barley itself. We do not distill on grains, so we never have grains in the pot. So it's not tannins coming out of the barley husks or the barley products. It's definitely the tannin. Any tannins are coming out of the barrel. But I'm really looking for the Maltsmith to feature fruit and floral esters and have a lot more depth of caramels and the flavors that are in a beer coming through as a whiskey.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the fruitiness. I think to me, it kind of reminds me, I've only had a couple whiskeys that have this note. It's a bit of like it's a very specific example, but to me, it kind of reminds me of like a fermented plum kind of flavor of the finish. And I do get that now that you mentioned fruit. I'm kind of looking deeper. Also, I was a little flustered by the the technical issue, so I on one of my notes earlier. I was like caramel, like, which is the most basic thing ever. I'm normally a little more specific than that, but yeah, totally. I get there's a bit of like it's a stone fruit to me. You said peach. I think I'm
Yep.
thinking the same territory there as well.
Yep.
Really, really interesting. And that's what I think even said at the beginning. It's like one of the most unique flavors. I've never had a whiskey like this.
So one of the fun things about making whiskey out of a beer is you have quite a few variables that you can control, not just the recipe, so the grain bill that you would use, but you also have the strain of yeast, the fermentation temperatures, the conditioning length, and then all the other processes that happen once you take that wash and put it into a still. What's so interesting about brewers is brewers have learned how to take barley, add a variety of yeast, and at a certain temperature, coax flavors out of that. So you don't get the same flavors when you use different yeast. You don't get the same flavors when you use one yeast at different temperatures. And then finally, brewers all know that one of the processes of making a good beer is an aging process. That's where the word lager comes from. So you store that beer, and it goes from being a green beer, meaning it has a lot of flavors that haven't melded and matured, into a really delicious beer. That takes a couple of days to a couple of months, depending on the beer. It could even take a couple of years on certain types of beers. We give our beer 2 weeks of cold conditioning after a 7-day fermentation. So we're into everything 3 weeks before we even put it into the still. That's not efficient, but it does lead to a really good beer. And that's what is causing these flavors. You're like, I've never tasted this before. And the simple answer is because, well, people don't do that. I mean, historically, you won't find Scotch, Irish, Japanese, Canadian, Kentucky whiskeys doing that. It's just not efficient, and nor is it traditional.
Well, I love everything about that. Then I mean, I love traditional. Don't get me wrong, but I also love with brands like this. I love experimentation and doing things differently, and that's what's pretty incredible. I have a couple questions in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and get the Farmsmith poured, but I do want to ask you a couple questions from the chat that have come in.
You bet.
One is from Michael. He says he's loving the details on the website, especially dealing with local growers. Are they malting in-house or working with a local maltster?
No. There's so many very distinct skills, and you're going to find out that every time you ask me a question, I boil the ocean. I ask like 10 questions that weren't asked. So bear with me on this. The traditional process, the way malt houses, farmers, and end users like breweries and distilleries work, is that the malt house tells the farmers what to grow. And they tell them that based on generally AMBA, which is American Malting and Brewing Association's specifications about what will sell best in the commodity market, what has the most resistance to blight, the most bug resistance, the highest yield. Yeah, yield came in again. And those things are grown and then sold from the farmer to the malt house if and only if they hit certain specifications. Otherwise, it's either plowed under and becomes compost or it's sold as feed.
Mm.
We tried to break that process by going directly to the farmers and saying, we want you to take risks. We want you to grow barley that isn't designed to have the highest yield. It's designed to have the most interesting flavors. And so we're going to pay you a lot more for that malt. We're going to pay you by the acre instead of by the bushel. We're going to pay you, if we are paying by volume, we're going to pay you 2 to 3 times the amount so that you'll take those risks for us. And then we will bring that to a malt house, and the malt house will malt to our specifications instead of to a commodity market specification. So everything is backwards compared to the way most big malt houses work. The pieces, the word piece means batch in a malt house. The pieces that they move through small malt houses are sometimes only 2 or 2.5 tons instead of 250 tons or even 2,000 tons at a batch, at a piece. So we're very fortunate to be able to separate those varieties, those farms, and have farms take risks that we share in and make flavors. So I think I answered part of the question. The last question was, do the farmers do their own malting? Absolutely not. The malting is done at Washington malt houses. All except for one, we did have Montana Craft Malt do some malting for us on Washington grown grain. But we're trying to support the grain shed, so we buy 100% from Washington. And we're also trying to support local malt houses. So I really try not to have any barley malted outside of Washington, even though there's some delicious products coming out of there, out of California, out of New York, out of all sorts of places. We've decided not to do that, and not because we don't like them, but because we want our Washington malt houses to succeed.
Totally. We can do it. California should step up their game and have more distilleries using it, is what I would say. You don't have to use it.
You bet. Admiral Malting, man, you got such good malt houses down there.
Yeah, I see a few people responding to your previous comments. Michael says, geez, long fermentation, nice. And then Jennifer says, I like that thinking. So it sounds like they are in alignment with that. That's
cool.
That's really great. And then Northwest Bourbon comes in saying, Copperworks makes some amazing American single malt. Well, cheers, Northwest. Thank you so much for stopping in. Yeah. Okay. Well, the Farmsmith. So this one was actually one of the most interesting ones I tasted when I was at the brewery. Or sorry, not brewery. It's the tasting house. Is your distillery there as well, or do you guys distill elsewhere?
We distill downtown Seattle, where you visited, and then we have a Kenmore tasting room that is only a tasting room. We don't do any distilling there, but it's a way for us to engage better with the public. We have events, and we make cocktails and sell bottles out of that location.
Got it. But yeah, tell us about Farmsmith. What makes that one interesting and unique? Ooh, I think you're muted. I think it may have muted you. There you go.
Sorry about that. We talked about the Maltsmith being a feature of a beer recipe. Mm-hmm. Well, the Farmsmith is not that. The Farmsmith is about a single variety, single vintage, single farm presentation of one flavor that comes from that barley. So we talked about how we like to take risks with the farmers. One of the things I briefly mentioned, AMBA, American Brewing and Malting Association, their goal is to help pick the best barleys for their members. How do you become a member? You pay your dues. How much do you pay? Well, you pay based on how many barrels of beer or proof gallons of whiskey you manufacture. So the more you make, the more you pay. And the more you pay, the more votes you have. So guess who votes on barley that gets planted? Miller Coors, Anheuser-Busch, right? The big brands have the most skin in that game. They work with the big research institutes. They are processing barley from science into the field. They're looking for yields. Guess what they're not looking for? When you think about the beer manufacturers I just talked about, malt flavor is not the thing those guys are looking for. So it turns out that barley is being selected against flavors, because what's more important is that it is high yield and resistant to blight and bugs. And I appreciate those things. Farmers don't want to have to be fighting infestations. On the other hand, we can still have delicious barley, but that's not what an AB beer is known for. So
Sure.
all the way back to what is this? This is about featuring the flavor that comes from a specific barley, from a specific farm on a specific harvest year. Those things change. The harvest year changes. The farm terroir changes, what their soil's like, what their water is like, what their processes are like, all change the flavor, even of a given barley. And if we grow one barley on the east side of the state and the same barley on the west side of the state, it's going to have a very different expression and flavor. In phenotype, it's going to look different, but it's also going to taste different. And that's what we're exploring with the Farm Smith.
Yeah,
So
I will say this one
is a barley called Baroness. It's grown in Colfax, Washington by Bill Myers. On his farm, he and his daughters grow the farm's called Joseph's Granary. And we've been making that product into whiskey for about 8 years.
I will say my first impression of this when I tried it, it almost reminds me of a gin because I feel like there's such strong herbal qualities to it that kind of feels similar to like the botanicals used for a gin. I know you guys do make a gin, which actually I tried the barrel aged version of your gin while I was there. It was fantastic.
Cool.
I made the mistake of telling Ethan that I was not a gin lover. And he's like, oh, wait till you try this. So it was delicious. But, are there certain like flavor characteristics you look for with each, maybe not each release of it, but is there kind of like an overall theme that you guys look for with your whiskey that kind of makes it uniquely Copperworks?
No. So we don't tell the variety of barley what it's going to taste like. And we don't look for barleys that have no flavor and hope that all the barrels, all the flavor is going to come from the barrel. That is uninteresting to me. So what we do instead is we work with farmers to grow barley varieties that work on their farm, that they really love using it as a crop rotation to help disrupt bug cycles or disease cycles, to break up the soil, aerate it. And so it's often a winter crop. And so by using that barley that those farms would otherwise be growing alfalfa or vetch, but they get to grow something that becomes a value add product, we end up getting a whole lot more support from that farmer to grow that on their property. So we don't even know what it's going to taste like, and we don't know when it's going to be ready. We harvest that barley, we malt it, we put it in the brewery, and then we come out with the wash, we put that in the stills, we put them in a choice of barrels, we put them in warehouse conditions, and eventually, we're tasting it every 3 minutes. No, we're tasting it every 3 months. And eventually we get something that really we're delighted with the flavor of. And that's when we bottle it. And we don't bottle it before, we just keep waiting. Well, we used to do that. We did that for 10 years, and we didn't even put a name on them. We just released it. It was batch 40, batch 41, batch 42. And each one was different, and we would celebrate what the difference was from that release. Until after about 10 years, we finally decided, you know what? We can do all of that experimentation under the moniker Farm Smith, but also take our 5 malt recipe, which is really not about a single variety because of all those different roasts or kiln temperatures of that barley. We'll focus on the grain recipe itself, on the malt. So malt smith and farm smith, those are how those two differentiate. Other than that, a lot of the processes are exactly the same. Yeast strain, fermentation time, cut points. We make different barrel choices based on some of those flavors, but other than that is pretty much the same process.
Got it. Yeah, a couple people in the chat are making comparisons. Kind of what Waterford was doing for Irish whiskey. It kind of sounds like you guys are very terroir focused on this release.
Yeah, Mark had the same. I was so psyched to see what he was doing there, and at Riccolotti before. Really great visionary. By the way, in about 1%, my phone will die, and I'll move over to the computer, and
I'm sorry.
I will be offline for video, but
that's totally fine. Well, we'll take you on video as long as we can get you. I'll say.
Okay.
But yeah, let's. I'm gonna go ahead and get the Pete Smith poured, because I will say when I said the distillery, the Farm Smith. At one point, I was like, "Oh, this is the most interesting favorite thing I've had," and then I tried the Pete Smith, and I think that kind of blew my mind a little bit further. So I'm going to pour that one. Tell us a little bit about the decision to make Pete Smith, and tell us about the peat, because I know you guys are using Washington peat based on the conversation with Ethan.
Yep. So a long story there, which I'll try to truncate just for brevity. But as you probably know, peat is an organic material that can happen in any part of the world and anywhere where there was water at one time. And we have almost 500 peat bogs in Washington. About 10 of them are commercially mined, and the rest of them are protected wetlands. That's the best thing to use peat for, is protecting wetlands. Of those, we have one in Shelton, Washington, and Matt Hoffman, who was the original head distiller at Westland, and I had both been reading a paper that was printed in 1954 that was reviewing those peat bogs and looking at it as a potential source for commercial activity. Well, it turned out that the one in Shelton had a lot of the attributes that would make a flavorful barley if smoked, if the peat was used to smoke that barley. So Westland had the funds to go get that started with Skagit Valley malting. We came along a week after they started that, and we said, hey, we're in this too. We would like to source grains, our own vision of the grain, but we're going to use a single farm, single variety, single vintage harvest, but now we're going to peat it under specifications. So Westland helped really establish that with Skagit Valley malting, so we owe them huge kudos. And then we would always have Skagit Valley make us a drum just for ourselves. And that was how our peat excursion started. We did that for 6 years. The bad news is Skagit Valley malting closed. And during that time, when they closed, they're coming back to life now, literally out of the ashes of peat. But after about 3 years of making peat, we really started thinking hard about what is the best thing to do with carbon that's been sequestered in the ground. And the best thing is to leave it there. What's the worst thing to do? Dig it up and burn it and put that carbon right back in the air. So we're moving away from the concept of using peat. After the 6 years of peat that we've put up is exhausted, we won't be making peat anymore. We'll be making instead using the
I think Jason, we just lost you on your phone. So I'm gonna pull you up on your computer. I could tell it was dying, it was slowly dying. Let me try this. So 1 second.
Let's see if we hear voices there.
Oh my God, you sound amazing. This is so much better.
All right, good deal. So it
Did you
sounds
guys-
good, but I'm dead on the video.
No, it's all good. Okay, I think the last you heard, Alfonso says using. I think the last thing you heard was using something. So maybe just backtrack just a little bit. We heard most of that, but backtrack a little bit.
So we've decided to quit using peat and instead use the ingredient that we have in abundance here in Washington State that literally is being burned and put into the atmosphere. And that ingredient is fruit wood. So as you know, we grow 75% of the world's apples. We grow a ton of cherries. We grow a ton of plums. And so all of this fruit wood is being harvested or cut down to replant or remove the farm. And it's being slash burned. So they just chop it up, light it, let that smoke go into the atmosphere. What if we chipped that and used that wood to burn through controlled environments to smoke barley? So that's the new vision, is not to let that material go to waste, but to flavor barley with the smoke that comes from fruit wood, which is another Washington ingredient instead of peat. But right now we're not talking about that. We're talking about the peat. So that peat is not sphagnum moss. The peat that you get out of Scotland and Ireland is sphagnum moss. This peat is mainly the main ingredient, the main vegetation that was crushed and formed into peat was tea myrtle. So think about a little bush, and some of the sticks in that are about the size in diameter of your pinky. So there's a ton of solid wood looking things in there, charcoal because of the pressure and the years, but it literally is more like charcoal than like the peat that you see in Scotland. And it doesn't have near the phenols, so the 6 carbon double chained bonds that form that make what we think of as a phenol unit that comes out of the flavors out of Scotland. We don't have those in much abundance. So it's going to be much more campfirey and much less Band-Aidy, creosote tasting than you would get out of Scotch.
Exactly, and that's actually what I wrote in my notes. I'm like, this is it's a medium peat. Like, it's not super mild. Like, it's definitely there, but it's not overpowering. It's like it's kind of, it feels like a complement to the whiskey. You know, as much as I love some heavily peated Scotches from Scotland, it seems like the peat is the most forward element to it. But this one, you're still getting all of that flavor of the whiskey. It's like the smoke is like mingled into it, which I think is really unique, and I think it works so well for this release. That's why I quickly had a new favorite from. I love the Farm Smith at the distillery, but then I tried the Peat Smith. I'm like, oh yeah, this is my jam.
It's interesting. The Farm Smith is my favorite of our 3 flagships, and the reason I like that one the best right now is because it really, I know how special this is. It'll never be made again. When that harvest year, when that whiskey from that harvest year, that variety is gone, it's gone forever. Whereas the peat, we do an annual peat batch. And so it's always different, but it's not that much different because the smoke is still overpowering most of the flavors. Now, when you mention, I love Islay scotches.
Same.
Those, I can overwhelm myself after about 15 tastings of Ardbeg, when you've got a whole protocol going and you're just like, God, man, I'm just drinking liquid smoke now. But there's nothing more fun than that. You don't taste anything after that for that evening, but what a great time. But that wasn't what we were looking to do. We, first of all, couldn't do it because Washington doesn't have that type of intensity of phenols. And secondly is, again, that's already been done. So what was more fun to do is something that really hadn't been done, bring in a little smoky character from the local peat, but be sure to keep that malt flavor going. And that was due to a choice of barrel chars and toast, fermentation conditions. We standardized our cuts, so those didn't change from the Farm Smith to the Peat Smith. But everything else was decision on flavor.
Gotcha. And a question, going back to the farmsmith a bit, you mentioned like it's never going to be done again. Are you guys planning a different? I mean, is it always going to be the same farm that you're working with, or are you planning to potentially work with other farms and maybe have a different label? I'm just curious to see what the future plan is for that brand.
Yeah, I did kind of leave you hanging on that, didn't I? Let me give you a little more depth of that. So, Farmsmith, you remember how I was saying before, we experimented and we released a different batch number, or we called it a release number.
Yep.
Farmsmith is still perpetuating that concept. So each release of Farmsmith is a different farm and or a different variety and always a different harvest year. So we've worked with 7 different farms and 9 different varieties. So sometimes we'll have one farm that one year grows Alba malt and the next year grows Fritz. But then we have Genie malt that we've been buying from 2 different farms and year after year buying from the same farm. So the only thing that changes with the Genie is the harvest year from one farm, but we can compare Genie malt from Athena, Oregon, and Genie malt from can't remember the region in Washington, but from a farm in Washington, and compare the flavors of that Genie malt grown on 2 different farms.
Gotcha. Is this info available? Like, if you, I don't have the full bottles here. I just have the samples in front of me. Is it on the bottle, or is there anywhere that someone that gets nerdy like that, like the viewers here do, can they find that information anywhere about the specific batches?
Man, you just teed me up for one of my favorite things. So thank you for that. I feel like I owe you money. On our website, we have, we have spirits, and then we have whiskey, and then we have past releases. And so when you drive down into the past releases, you'll see all of the releases, batch number 1, all the way to batch number 50, and then Farmsmith, Maltsmith, etc. When you click on that and you open it up, you'll see tasting notes, and then you'll see a little link, and that link says production specs. And when you click on that, that'll open up a PDF, and that PDF will tell you every variety of barley, each mash, its conditions, each fermentation, its conditions, each distillation, both in wash and beer strip and spirit run, and then each barrel and how many barrels we blended and what we ended up with, what we proofed it at, and any process that we did, like marrying for 3 months or whatever.
Wow.
So each release usually has 3 and sometimes as many as 7 pages of detail.
Oh my God, we love it. I just want to highlight this comment from Zofri. He says, our community loves information. So that's very, very true. The more transparent people are, the more we love it, because I know there's certain situations where you can't be transparent about things, but when you can, we love it. We eat it up, because especially with something like this, something so unique, I do want to know the difference. I want to, I have a batch, let's say batch 3 and a batch 10. Yeah. What are the differences? Here we go, right there. That's awesome. Yeah.
Well, Clifton, I will challenge the concept that there are things that you can't share, because I don't really believe that. I believe that if I told you exactly, which I do, I told you our recipe for Maltsmith. I will tell you our temperature, and if you go online, you will find everything, temperatures and volumes and yields and everything. And the reason that I want you to know that is because if you decided to open a distillery, it would be great for you to learn from everybody you can, and then to do a little better. Because the option is that you don't learn from anybody and you don't do very well for a while until you learn from your own mistakes. Well, that doesn't help our industry. If you're making a product that you put on the shelf and it's not very good, but it's called American single malt whiskey and it's craft, it's like, yeah, but that's hurting our industry. So by sharing, not only are we getting the geeks like you and I and your followers here, we're also making sure that anybody who wants to learn about whiskey has all the tools they can to be as good as they can be as distillers and consumers, and that the next level, whoever comes after them, is going to be even better. And that helps the whole industry.
Wow. And Michael, who's in the chat, says a high tide raises all ships. I've heard that phrase before, but what better way to put it than that?
Mhm.
That's incredible. And then, yeah, Alfonso says, good point. We have a friend here. I don't think he has any Copperworks, but he does have some Washington malt. So our friend Tony said he's a big fan of Washington peat. I have 2 Washington peated single malt. So Tony, cheers to you. Thank you for joining us for that.
That's great.
Yeah. I know we have 2 more to go. Do you mind hanging on a little bit longer as we taste these
Oh
last
no,
2?
I'm good. Yep. Especially
Okay,
for all
cool.
the little technical problems. I appreciate you.
It's all good. Like I said, I struggled with some as well, so it's only fair. So, well, cool. Let's move on to the last 2 we have tonight. Now, I think these are some of the more special releases you guys have. I think this was the core lineup, right? The Malt Smith, Farm Smith, and Pete Smith.
That's right.
All right. Well, now we're going to move into 2 special releases. One of which you said comes out tomorrow,
That's
which
right.
is incredible. Tell us about this next one, this Amaro finish.
First of all, do you know what an Amaro is? I mean, I don't want to be insulting.
Other than just being like an Italian bitter liqueur, that's basically the extent of it,
Okay.
my knowledge.
You know what? That's perfect. That's almost all
Okay.
you need to know.
Okay.
So, Amaros, we are familiar with Montenegro and Chinar and Luxardo and some of those classic brands that you would use as modifiers in cocktails. Well, it turns out that Amaros are also often drunk just by themselves. And so we have a really good friend named Skip Tonetti, and Skip owns Letterpress Distilling here in Washington. And as you can tell by his last name, Tonetti, he is in fact Italian.
There we go.
He makes a limoncello that's amazing. It's honey based instead of cane sugar or corn syrup. And then he also makes an Amaro, and Amarino is Amaro Amarino. And he takes that Amaro Amarino and he puts it into one of the Copperworks used whiskey casks, and he ages it for a year. And then he bottles that as a special reserve version of that. And then he gives us back that cask, and we put whiskey in it to finish it and pick up that Amaro flavor. Well, it's almost like a cocktail in a bottle. So it's got what would normally be the flavor of our Copperworks whiskey, and then also what is often used to modify a whiskey. Think of it as sort of like a Manhattan with a little more botanicals. So those botanicals could come from a bitters. So yeah, it's a hell of a thing. It's 100 proof and kind of a ready to drink cocktail in terms of just all the flavors that come through. If I was to make that into a cocktail, I would either highball it, so put it with some soda water, or I'd put it into like a Rob Roy and just add a little bit of sweet vermouth. Call it.
I was going to say it has a quality to it that's like almost savory. It's kind of going a different direction than what we've been doing before. It's kind of like is that a common, again, as someone that's not super familiar with Amaros, is that like a common thing to be a little more savory in the flavor, or at least in the nosing?
In the nose, yes, you're going to start getting more. The botanicals do come through as earthy, savory, and maybe medicinal a little bit, like menthol or eucalyptus. You're definitely going to pick up more of that that kind of minty flavor in the finish.
Yeah, to me, it's coming across almost like a again herbal, but in a different way than we were talking earlier. This is almost like a olive, or like maybe not olive brine, but like an olive note, which is very specific.
Yeah, well, that's one of the great things about palates is that we all have different. We all detect different flavors.
100%. Yeah,
I don't really get the olive flavor out of there, but I do. I do agree. There's just a whole bunch of different, somewhat savory flavors coming through.
Nice. So I'm going to go for a taste, but there is a question in the chat that I want to make sure you have a chance to answer before we go. Tony, who says he said that he saw the 200-year oak featured on another channel.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that, and will we see something like that in the future? I'm going to leave that to you while I have a taste of this one.
Yeah. So the Whiskey Tribe did a very funny, unannounced to us, just surprise video of our color cast, which we're going to taste next.
Okay.
And so I'm not going to do too many spoilers on it because we are going to taste it next.
Okay.
But your question about will we have anything like that again? So that particular cask will never be available again. However, we did use that cask 2 more times after the release that the Whiskey Tribe wrote about. And that first release is already been pulled out of the cask and is ready to bottle. We're just waiting on the right time to do it. And the second time the third time we filled it, we actually put gin in it, and it's still in there. So that's been almost 9 months of that gin being in there.
Wow.
So we'll have that coming up. So what do you think, Clifton?
So I got away from the olive note. The olive note was on the nose. And listen, I love olives. My guilty pleasure drink when I'm having a really stressful day, it's not actually bourbon. It's actually a dirty martini. So like, I'm a big fan of olive. So maybe that's why my mind was on that today. But on the palate, I 100% see what you're saying about it being a cocktail. I mean, I almost want to have this on the rocks, just like over ice, because it does have that. There's a quality to it that I think gives it kind of that vermouth quality. Like you said, a Manhattan. 100%. I mean, I could just drink this on the rocks and basically be a cocktail. That's really unique. I like that a lot.
Yeah, some of our other Amaros that we're familiar with, Averna, or I already mentioned Montenegro. They have gentian. Gentian is a bitter botanical. It's basically a root, and it's what makes everything bitter. It's what bitter comes from. And some of those are then sweetened with, well, all of Amaros are sweetened, and some of them are sweetened that kind of mask that, but that always comes through. So what you're getting out of this is a little bit like the reason I said a Manhattan is you're getting the sweetness that you might get from a Italian vermouth. You're getting some botanicals that you might get from an amortized wine like a vermouth. And you're getting the bitters that you might get from bitters from the gentian that comes through in the Amaro. So it's really kind of a cocktail. Most of the barrel finishes that we do on our whiskey are not really designed to end up tasting more like a cocktail. They're designed to kind of blend the flavors of the previous drink that was in that barrel with what the whiskey tastes like. But this one, working with Skip Tonetti, is just so much fun, and we love these flavors. We love his Amaro. We use it in our cocktails in both our downtown and Kenmore locations anyway. And so then having this whiskey with that flavor in it already has just been a real treat. And this is, I think, the second time we've done an Amaro cask as a whiskey. I know we've done it as a gin before.
Oh, I can see that working super well as well for it. Just, again, replacing a cocktail. It drinks like a cocktail, have it on the rocks. I mean, my partner is a huge gin drinker. He drinks gin on the rocks all the time. So I think something like that he would be a huge fan of. He loved your gin, by the way.
Oh, good.
That's kind of what I was talking to gin at the distillery. It's like he had the gin, and I was like, I'm not the biggest gin fan. And then I'm like, okay, I like your gin.
Well, one of the problems I refer to Copperworks as a whiskey company with a gin problem. We started, like a lot of small distilleries, making whiskey but not selling it. And so we sold gin. I never wanted to sell vodka, but I didn't get into the business to sell vodka. But we make our vodka from 100% malted barley, so the flavors are very unique and different.
True.
And of course, it's the base of the gin. So we had requests to buy the vodka, and when we let people taste it, they're like, "Oh, I want your vodka." So now we sell vodka. We only sell one. We don't do any flavored vodkas. We're not, again, in the business to be another vodka distillery. But vodka couldn't be made without making the beer. The gin couldn't be made without making the vodka. And those cast finish gins, we've done about 35 different finishes on gins. Without making that gin from that vodka, from that beer. So, you can even see on the screen here, our tagline is, "From great brewing comes great spirits." All of this is predicated on the fact that we start with a beer, and then those flavors are what allow us to do all the rest of this.
For sure. Actually, I almost bought that T-shirt, but then I realized half of it was probably going to be cut off, so it would just say "From Great Brewing," and then people would be very confused. So I wanted to buy the
Hey,
Copperworks Distilling.
thank you. Very nice T-shirt. Flying the
No,
flag.
your merch was awesome. I wanted to buy more, but well, tell us about the logo. Okay, random sidetrack. The logo, because this guy I saw all over Seattle. This kind of look. Where does the name come from, and where does like Copperworks in general? Does it fit into Seattle culture and history?
Yeah. So great question. True story. Micah and I spent 3.5 months trying to come up with a name. One night we just got fed up. I said, I'm going to come up with a name. By the time we wake up in the morning, we will have a name. I could not think of anything. I stayed up all night. I came up with the fact that I'm from Kentucky. I came up with the word Derby Distilling. Really bad name, but that's what we settled on. So we incorporated as Derby Distilling. We tried to get that trademarked, and they said, nope, there's a Darby Wine Estates in California.
Oh my gosh.
And they don't have a brand called Darby, but they could. And so so I said, what can we do? And they said, we could put a word in front of it. So we put the word big in front of it. Big Derby, even stupid, more stupid than Derby. That failed in trademark too. But by then we had incorporated in all our papers. So we are Big Derby Distilling Company doing business as Copperworks Distilling.
Wow.
So
interesting. Well, first of all, I think it's funny that your blocker for Derby was Darby versus like the Derby, like that being a thing.
Yep.
That's really strange in itself.
Yep.
But go on, continue. This is a very fascinating story. I'm very intrigued.
Right. So, when I worked for Red Hook, its brand was actually called Independent Ale Brewing, doing business as Red Hook. When I worked for Pyramid, it was actually Hart Brewing, doing business as Pyramid. So this is not unusual that there are a bad name to start with, and later you find a you buy it.
Okay, good to know.
So we had the stills being made our copper stills being made at Forsyth up in Rothes, Scotland.
Yep.
And I mentioned that I was the first brewer at Pike Place Brewery. When we had our kettle made, we had it made. It was made at Alaskan Copper and Brass Works down the street on 6th Avenue South in Seattle. Those guys, their very first vessel that they had made 76 years before was a copper brew kettle. And so I always had in the back of my mind that was the company that made copper. Alaskan Copper and Brass. We went to Scotland and we were working with Forsyth, but Forsyth was the general term for Forsyth, even though that's their brand name, is Copper and Brass Works. So they make copper and brass stills. Brass is what the spirit safe is made out of and what all the bands that wrap in the rivets are, and copper is what the main sheet metal is made from that they hammer out. So it was easy. I didn't want to name the company Copper and Brass because that didn't make any sense. But the word Copperworks, lo and behold, had not been trademarked. So Big Derby Distilling or Copperworks Distilling. Well, when I saw pictures, we had just invested in 10,500 pounds of copper, and that was being hammered out. And I was like, of course we're going to be Copperworks because we're going to have to work the rest of our life to pay off all this copper. So
I love it.
So that's how that came. And
that is awesome.
The image is, we're talking about from great brewing comes great spirits. Craft is what we lean into. What you might notice on that is a hammering man. The guy is hammering the C into shape. Well, if you really look closely, the C is the still, and his arms form the W. So it's a little Easter egg. He is.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't have seen that. I like it though. That's cool.
Yeah, right. So that whole image is just kind of reminding people that no, we're not Soviet propaganda, but we are craft, and we're kind of that hardworking, all the way from the farm to the way the stills are made to the way we move barrels around and how we blend and everything is done by hand.
That's such a fun story. I would have never expected that story would come out of me asking, like, where does the name come from? So I love that I asked it. I'm glad that I asked it.
Like I say, I like to boil the ocean when asked a question.
All right. Well, we got one more to pour here, which is the color cast, which it's very true to its name because this is the darkest one of the darkest whiskeys I've ever had. Tell us, what is Color Cask and why is it so dang dark?
Okay, so do you know? Well, let's just assume. I'm going to assume you know nothing about sherry, and then
oh, nothing at all. I've never heard the word. No, but go on.
Right.
There's a chance someone watching may not know. So go ahead.
Right. So sherry is made in a 45-kilometer region, the southern tip of Spain, and one of the interesting things is that it constitutes both the world's driest and the world's sweetest wine.
Mm-hmm.
Finos and Manzanillas are some of the driest wines in the world. Pedro Jimenez is some of the sweetest. What is sherry? It's a wine that's made from in a particular region from a particular grape with a process that is either oxidative or biological. So they either have no air getting into the wine throughout its entire aging process, and those are the Finos and the Manzanillas and dry, clear ones, or they have oxygen getting in and darkening the wine. Oloroso is a classic sherry, and it's dark, but it's not always the same level of dark. A long time ago, if you think back 10 years, Americans used to really demand that everything look homogeneous, right? Beers, okay, maybe 20 years. Beers had to be filtered through diatomaceous earth to look crystal clear, no matter what. And eventually, brewers and customers got over that. And they're like, you know what? You can drink our beer. As a matter of fact, now the famous thing to do is, a hazy. If you can't stand a spoon up in it, it's no good. So this concept of having to have everything look homogeneous, the same as it did the year before that, went away. But in the old days, like 50 to 80 years ago, maybe even 100 years ago, they would add a little bit of very, very dark sherry into Oloroso to darken it so it looked like the batch before and the batch that was going to come after. They could always raise the color up to a consistent dark.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that.
The way they made that sherry dark was by using sherry that had left the skins on and aged for decades. And it was called black sherry because, in fact, it was just black. It looked like ink. And the only
almost like I'm just showing my camera. It's pretty dark.
Whiskey that was in a berry. Now, they don't do that anymore. And Augusto Bodega, which is the name for the sherry manufacturer in their warehouse, still had 6 of these color casks, as they named them. So dark sherry, black sherry that was going to be used to color Oloroso sherry with. And they didn't need them anymore. But they knew that the sherry barrels themselves were valuable. These casks have been sitting for hundreds of years. And in fact, the Augusto's cask were 200 years in process before they emptied them and sold them. It's always a bad thing when a sherry house, when a bodega sells casks. That means that they're not doing well, that their vessels are more valuable than the product inside their vessels. And the worst case is they actually sell the property. And that's exactly what that sherry manufacturer did, is they were on the top of the hill that they had built almost 300 years before. And that was now super valuable land. And they sold that and retired. And that's the end of that legacy. But that cask was one of 6. 5 of them Macallan's bought, and one of them was gifted to Copperworks from the barrel broker. And he says, you guys just won the 2018 Distillery of the Year. I know you make great whiskey. I want you to put one of your best whiskeys in this cask and tell me when it's ready. So
that's awesome.
What we call the Queen's Run. Queen's Run is when you basically only use the heads and tails to charge the spirit still instead of the heads, tails from the previous batch and low wines that you've made. So I don't want to get into all of that detail, but basically it's something that you get to do probably every twice a year, maybe.
Okay.
Times a year. And we were able to fill that barrel with the equivalent of 3.5 bourbon barrels of whiskey, because it's a 700-liter barrel.
Oh, wow. That's huge. Wow. Okay.
200-liter barrel.
Yeah.
So we filled that with new make whiskey that was Queen's Run, and waited and waited and waited and waited. We had a distiller who was opening up a new distillery in China, a massive organization that they were building. It was beautiful. He had worked at Cavalon, and he really knew a lot about barrel warehousing. He worked in a lot of different distilleries, but I trusted his experience in Cavalon. And he tasted that, and he goes, "You know what? This is perfect. If you wait any longer, it's going to get too much. But if you pull it right now, it's going to be the most iconoclastic spirit that I've tasted." So we sat on it for 2 more months, and then we pulled it. And we put it in stainless for a while, and then we bottled it at 100 proof, like we are apt to do with everything. Mm-hmm. And that black whiskey tastes nothing like whiskey. It reminds me of a port. I mean, honestly, it doesn't.
Yeah. Yes. On the nose. I mean, I've not tasted. I mean, I tasted it at the distillery, but I've not tasted it yet tonight.
Yeah.
On the nose, I would never guess this is a whiskey, other than like, I was gonna say some relatively oaky notes, but that could just come from it just being an aged, sherry or port.
Yeah. So it's not finished. It's
right.
Fully matured, 5 years in that.
Gosh. And you said the new make went right into this cask, right?
That's right. Right.
Wow.
So
again, look at the color of this one, guys. Like, this is like,
it's like splitting.
Yeah. I mean, it smells delightful.
Well, it also will taste as different from whiskey as it smells different from whiskey. So when
I'm gonna go for a taste.
Yep. You'll be like, what?
Yep. Would not guess that's a whiskey, but
right.
Man. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, that long finish. By the way, that finish will last a good 2 minutes.
That's what it's still lingering. That's the first thing I thought of, was like, it feels like almost, it's not viscous, but it feels viscous. Like, it just totally. Like, I feel like slowly still, and it's still hanging out there. Wow. That is okay. When you were offered that cask, like, how did you decide, like, yeah, let's put new make in it versus using it as a finishing cask? What was that decision?
Well, we really wanted to feature the gift. We knew how rare that was, and it didn't make sense to me to get anything in between it. Not for the opportunity that we had.
Right.
Now, you remember that I said we have filled it again with whiskey. This time it was finished whiskey. And
gotcha,
that
okay.
stayed in. It was like 5 weeks. I mean, it was so much more flavor in that cask that we barely needed to leave it in to get a nice finish on that second 700 liters. And then we still had enough flavor to fill it with gin.
Wow.
So back to your question, why new make and why not just use it as a finishing cask? Because we felt that was the best way to honor that was to do a full expression of our best whiskey in that cask and see what we got. Here's what we could have done. We could have used that whiskey to blend. We could have put, literally, just like it's tradition of being a few drops goes into Oloroso to bring it dark, we could have put a few gallons in a batch of 10 barrels that we were doing of regular whiskey and come up with a darker color, a little bit of spice flavors. But that would not have told the real story about what does a 200-year-old barrel taste like when aged 5 years of new make whiskey. So here we go. It's kind of a crazy thing to do, which I think is why it's a little fun to taste and tell the story. I have so much more appreciation for it now than I did, because I knew a little bit about it, but hearing the detail that you provided is just fantastic. By the way, if you guys are in Seattle, this is part of a flight. They call it a special release flight. It was $30. We got to try 2 single casks
a port cask. Did I say red wine? It may have been port cask that you guys are offering.
It was port.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. And then color cask, but they offer this at the distillery. So if you guys are in Seattle, do you guys also offer this at the Kensington location?
In the Kenmore, you bet.
Kenmore,
Yep.
sorry.
Yep.
I heard Kensington. Okay. Yeah. So if you guys want a chance to try this, bottle wise, it still looks like it's for sale. You guys on your website.
Yeah, we probably I'm trying to guess. We probably have about 300 more bottles.
Okay. Yeah. Right now it's $170 on the website. But if you want a taste of it and you're near Seattle, go try it, because that's one of the most unique things I've ever tasted. I almost think I'm going to buy a bottle of it probably later today, because it's so unique and it's so fun. It's something I've never had before, and it's got a fun story behind it as well.
Yeah. The reason that we priced it as high as we did is because honestly, we hate to see it go. We know that it'll never be made again. Not by us,
Right.
not by anybody. Right? Macallan's has 5 of those barrels.
Yeah. So we'll see what they do with it.
You that what Macallan's is going to do with them is blend them off to add a very unique flavor that they couldn't have gotten anywhere else, but they're going to be very subtle in it. And that's wonderful. That's what their brand does. And that's going to be a lot of fun. And people are going to get really excited about those little tasting notes. Sort of a Japanese version of how to express something. But that's just not what our temperament is. We wanted to get that out there in full strength, but we didn't want it to see it go away. And so we only have these bottles. And again, a lot of the things we make are gone forever. But this one feels like it's going to be gone forever. I mean, like we'll never get anything close to it again. Not just like, oh yeah, that Alba malt grown in 2020 will never be tasted again. But maybe the Genie malt grown in 2020 will taste similar. No, not this. This is going to be gone forever. So.
Yeah, I just dropped a link in the chat for those that are curious. Check it out. Again, they do ship to a certain state, so definitely check your area if you're curious about it. Also, you can browse their website to see all of their releases, including the things that we tried through today. Man, you know what's funny? It's like I have a greater appreciation for that now that I've revisited it versus just doing it in the tasting room, because that is so unique, something I've never seen done before, and like you said, may never be done again. So that's incredible.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the fun things is to taste experiments in this. One of the things that I love about craft distilling, not just Copperworks and not just American single malt, but craft distillers in general are taking so many liberties with what used to be traditional products that barely could have any change made to them. Now people can do fun, interesting things that have simply never been done. And one of those things is cask finishing. But, you know, the choice of yeast, the choice of warehouse conditions, the choice of fermentation, the choice of variety of grains and farms, and then, of course, all the brewing methods, distilling methods, type of stills, shape of stills. It's just endless, the amount of variables. So it's really fun to have small distilleries making all of these different changes. I think we're getting some, we're in for just a whole new flavor. It's going to be kind of like what craft brewing was 30 years ago, where the door was low.
Yeah, I have 2 final questions for you, and then I'll let you go because I know it's getting late. One, like we saw the Amaro cask coming out soon. Is there anything fun that you're experimenting with that might be a future release or may not? Like, I'm curious to hear like what some of your experimental stuff that you guys are working on that you're curious to see, hopefully to come to fruition in the next few years.
Yeah, well, so the first question was, is there anything interesting and fun coming in the future? And the answer is yes. The second part of that question was, what are they? And I can tell you some of them, and I'm going to reserve some of them. One of the things, our tagline was "From great brewing comes great spirits," and I've spent a lot of my life as a brewer. One of the things that has always intrigued me is what happens if you take a flagship recipe from a brewery, you remove the hops, and then you ferment that, distill it, and age it in oak. So you make everything exactly the same as the brewery would do, using their same grain bill, their same yeast, their same fermenters, their same process, their same tools, but then you distill it and age it like a whiskey. Would you taste a new product. Well, I'm hoping that brewers around the world are going to be doing this in spades as more brewers become distillers. But being a early adopter of distilling from the brewing world, we started doing that 11 years ago. So we've been making beers from our partner friend breweries and distilling them and aging them as whiskeys. And we're going to start releasing some of those. So that's the thing that I'm most excited about. It really is sort of the final swan song of my tenure here, which is I'm going to bring back the whole concept of recipes that I helped develop and what those flavors are like, and turn those into whiskeys, which sometimes take a long time to age, but boy, they're going to be differentiating whiskeys. So
wow. Is the meant to kind of like feature as like a collaboration series, like you kind of are calling out where the brew is from?
Absolutely. We'll be doing a lot of storytelling around that.
Awesome.
And unlike collaborations, and nothing wrong with collaborating with barrels. Barrels are something you can do in the same lifetime, right? You know, it doesn't take that long to take a whiskey barrel, put beer in it, and then take that barrel back and put whiskey in it that's already been matured. But this concept took a long time to do. And so I expect we will see a lot of this coming out in some future. I'm hoping that future is 10 or 20 years. We start seeing a lot of breweries, beers distilled and fully aged and then released as a whiskey. And then we can say, wow, I remember drinking that beer. And by the way, they still make that beer. So here's a can of that beer, and here's a whiskey made from that beer.
That's awesome. I would love that. As a like whiskey lover and like someone kind of relatively new to beer, that sounds fantastic. That sounds like such a fun way to do it.
Yeah. So that's really the main thing that I'm excited about, and honestly is one of the main reasons why I opened up Copperworks, is to be with Micah. He and I were brewers and wanted to express the flavors of beer as a whiskey. So there we are.
And you've absolutely achieved it. Okay. One final question. It's a little bit of a fun question.
Okay.
If you're trapped on a deserted island, that's always like, okay, it started the question. You can only bring 2 whiskeys, one of which has to be from Copperworks, the other of which can be any whiskey worldwide. What 2 whiskeys are you bringing and why?
Well, if I had to bring one from Copperworks, that'll be pretty easy for me. I'm going to assume that it's one that is still available. It would be the Farm Smith. And the reason I always like that is that I love the flavor of it. And I also think that it has the most versatility. Like if I drink it neat, I get so much out of it. But if I drink it as a highball or I drink it as a Manhattan or an old fashioned, I still get a lot out of it. So that would be the one from Copperworks. If I was going to take that, so I was going to take a Farm Smith as one of the whiskeys, then the other whiskey I'm just thinking out loud here.
Go for it.
Really differentiating, and I'd want it to like hit on a whole bunch of different notes than the whiskey that we're making. So, I'd probably go with, again, assuming that I actually could take this, like could get it.
Yes. Yeah. The second one is wide range. Anything you want, get it.
I probably wouldn't. I'm going to tell you a couple of things I'm eliminating now. I probably wouldn't take anything Irish, even though I love Irish whiskey. Teeling is one of my favorite Irish.
Love Teeling, but okay. I also wouldn't say Teeling. Don't get me wrong. I love Teeling. I have several bottles of Teeling up here, but yeah, that wouldn't be my choice either.
I probably wouldn't take anything. Honestly, I wouldn't take a bourbon. And why is because I've had so many bourbons that now bourbon tastes like bourbon. I love the difference in bourbon. I wouldn't take a bourbon. I wouldn't take a Scotch. I would probably take a Japanese, but it wouldn't be a big brand. It'd probably be something like Chichabu. It would either be something like Chichabu or maybe something from Cavalin, because man,
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the reason? Just because it's so different from what the norm is?
Yep, that's because those are flavors that, again, I feel like I can explore one bottle in so many different expressions and get, depending on my mood, the temperature, what I've had in my mouth that day, I get different flavors and I just really find them exciting. And this is going to sound horrible, but I'm not bored with them. I'm not bored with the category, and I'm not bored with their flavors. They're very expressive. So yeah.
we see fans in the chat. Adam says Chichibu, and then Zopher says Kavalan. So like you have people agreeing with you in the chat here too.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure what expression I'd take of those because honestly,
that's a great answer. Honestly, that's one of the most unique. This is actually the first time I've asked that question, but I think I'm going to start asking more often because I think it's a fun question. So,
it is.
I really appreciate your answer. Someone also mentioned that Real Ale, Real Spirits and Blanco, Texas does that. They distill from its Devil's Backbone beer, and you can try both the beer and the whiskey.
Fantastic. I'm going to look those guys up.
Ooh.
Real Ale is one of my favorite places. If you haven't ever tasted Real Ale, it's because you don't live in Texas. They're a 70,000 barrel a year brewery, and they only sell in Texas, right? So you think about how big that volume is. And they only sell in Texas. They came to visit Copperworks, and we have a love relationship with them. We send them bottles. They send us beer. And I did not know that they had finally distilled the Devil's Backbone. So that's great to know.
That's exciting. Yeah. And so someone says they're a fan of Cavalan Amontillado. So I've not had that one, but I'm sure it's great.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Jason, again for joining us. I appreciate you working through the technical issues. People in the chat are also saying thank you for sharing your time and info with us nerds. It was nice to go into extra innings. I guess this is what we're calling it now. So Jason, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I'm so excited to continue to enjoy Copperworks. I'm glad to see that I can actually buy it online. I actually will be probably placing an order in the next day or so.
Thank you,
because I really enjoyed what I had when I was there, and then again tonight, just re-exploring it. It's been great. If you guys, no matter where you are, whether you're watching it live or watching the replay, check out the website. I'll put a link down in the description. See if you can find it in your area. If not, feel free to leave a comment, ask questions. I'm happy to answer it, or reach out to the folks over at Copperworks to see if they can give us some answers. But Jason, thank you again so much. This has been a fantastic time. Hope you have a great rest of your evening. And
thank you. And what a delight. It's been a lot of fun tonight. So
awesome.
Is there talking to you soon?
Yes. Is there anywhere people can find you online? Like, do you have like social media, or do you want people to follow Copperworks? Just curious where do you want to throw to people too? Oh,
we're back.
Oh, you're back.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry. I had one. I was saying one last thing. I was saying like, is there anywhere people can find you on social media, or like, do you prefer people to follow Copperworks? Like, where can people find you or the brand online?
Well, so me personally, I don't do much online stuff at all, and there's no agenda other than I'm just busy with other things. However, we do a very good job in my opinion, of telling our stories both on Instagram and Facebook. But we also, I'm going to encourage you. We're going to start moving to more video blogs. So right now we just have blogs, but we're going to start moving to more video blogs. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun with that, and a lot of productions coming out there. So as you start looking at the copperworksdistilling.com, you'll start finding a lot more content coming out there.
Awesome. Well, make sure you guys follow them. Again, I'll add that all info to the description. But that's it for tonight. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys next week. Jason, have a wonderful rest of your evening. And everyone else, I'll see you. Make sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe on your way out.
All right. Thank you. Good night, Clifton.
Good night, everyone. Have a good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.